Hello everyone and welcome to another Lorcana video. Today we're looking at another set 4 deck and one that may just be the best deck in the game right now. And it's took us a while, but we're here. Emerald Steel is finally a true, real big contender in the meta. And like I said, may well be sitting at the top right now, especially if you've been there playing on, Pixelborn or anything like that. You will know that a lot of people are trying this archetype out. So let's take a look at the list and see what the true highlights are. First off, we can talk about, I was going to say the elephant in the room, but maybe it's the bird in the room, which is Diablo. There's two versions of Diablo in this deck. We'll talk about the bigger one first. It's the 3-cost Uninkable Diablo, which 2/2 with strength and will, and it has shift, which is one of the shift effects from the new set, which is you actually have to discard an action to be able to shift it, so it doesn't actually cost ink to play if you do this. It quests for 1, it has evasive, but I think most importantly, it has its ability is when it is exhausted on your opponent's turn, whenever they draw a card, you draw a card, or you can draw a card, I guess. I think it is optional. So even if you shift, you lose a card to be able to do that. But as soon as you pass the turn over, well, they start the turn drawing a card, as long as your Diablo's exerted, of course. And then you instantly draw a card. And then every other card, as long as Diablo's alive and exerted on their turn, they draw. You just draw. So you get a draw engine in this one card alone. And outside of direct removal or some sort of shenanigans with, like, evasive and a Pinocchio or evasive Rush or something, it's really hard to deal with. So that is the crux of this deck and basically why the deck's so strong, combined with a card we'll get to in a minute. But to pair with that, there is the 1-cost Inkable Diablo, which again has a pretty solid ability. So 1-cost Inkable 1/2 that quests for 1, and its ability is you just get to look at your opponent's hand. So it's like Ursula and a few other cards that do that. It's not... you don't do anything with the hand after that, you just get to look at it. But turn 1, looking at what your opponent's opening is, can be quite powerful indeed, especially with this deck. And of course, it basically enables you to turn 1, play 1-drop Diablo into shift Diablo, so you just have that evasive card ready to go if you want to, or you can obviously wait till turn 2 and do it instead. But yeah, pretty solid card there, and also just one of the an extra 1-drop on the board. We'll get to one of the other key cards in the deck in a minute, but to just flesh out the 1-drops, we have Pegasus, a small, and the big one a little bit later as well, which can be quite useful for closing out those games. And we have Robin Hood. So those are pretty straightforward. Evasive Pegasus, Robin Hood to then shift into Big Robin Hood, and so on. You guys get the gist. The next card is an old favourite, Bucky. And this is, again, a card I've actually heard people say they think it may need banning going forward if this sort of deck continues. And even though at this moment in time I don't necessarily agree with that, I understand the sentiment. And the reason is, Bucky is, whenever you play a Floodborn character, each opponent chooses and discards a card. Bucky is a 1/1 that costs 2 and is inkable and has ward. Very difficult card to deal with because you typically don't quest with Bucky unless you are very certain that he's not going to get dealt with. And then ward obviously means it can't be targeted. So there are very few ways to actively deal with a Bucky outside of some of the AoE tools, or some of the different tools in the game that can like force the issue, such as anything where your opponent gets to pay, like Tremaine, for example, and things like that. Not that Tremaine really is often a problem against Bucky. And the problem here is you can play in this deck, and this can win you games on turn 2, effectively, is you can Diablo on 1, Bucky on 2, shift your big Diablo onto the little one, and then you can sing Sudden Chill. So what happens on turn 2 is you'll have a Bucky on board, an exhausted evasive Diablo. Your opponent, because the shifted Diablo is a Floodborn, your opponent will have discarded 1 card from that, from Bucky, and another card from Sudden Chill that you've just sang, and then your opponent suddenly is a few cards down and is then progressively more unlikely to be able to deal with Diablo or Bucky. And then, off the back of that, on the turn you do it, their turn, You draw a card to start refilling your hand, at least one card, and then it all snowballs from there. You've got Ursula Sing to sort of back up some of this, some of these tools you have. Like you can see the Fall, Let the Storm Rage On, the Sudden Chills to double discard if you want, Strength of Rage and Fire as well, which can be all these can be very powerful with Ursula. But really after that, just start dropping more Floodborn characters. If you get 2 Diablos down, it becomes insurmountable almost because you're drawing cards while they're losing cards. If you get 2 Buckies down, the late game, obviously, another route you can go is Robin Hood on 1, Bucky on 2, shift Big Robin Hood on 3. So then you'd again discard a card from your opponent because of Bucky, and you have just a 3/6 on board. Very, very powerful indeed. And then sort of I've sort of sketched over the rest of the deck, but touched on it a little bit. But then towards the end, we have this We Don't Talk About Bruno. And this looks a bit weird because we have a few cards that can sing this. We have the 3/5 drops, which is powerful, especially if you get to 3-drop on Robin. But also in this deck, We Don't Talk About Bruno is actually an acceptable card to just play if you get into that stage of the game. Often you can win other ways before turn 5 or 5 ink, let's say. But it is a card that you are like allowed to just play, because often your opponent, if things are going well, doesn't really have other cards in hand, which means you basically return a character to the hand, and because it's the only card in the hand, they then have to discard it. So you basically just nope in a character with that, and it's very, very strong. Of course, as I said, Pegasus, Beast, and Big Robin Hood are all able to sing that. One thing I will point out, there's a few different builds of this list I've seen knocking around. This is the one I've been playing recently. I think the Diablo 1 drops, I've seen people not play Diablo 1 drop. I think that is a crime somehow, because I think the card is so good and it opens you up, as I said earlier, to just winning games, right? If you go 1-drop Diablo, Bucky, Shift, you are so far ahead. It's kind of absurd. So I think that is value in itself. This deck does not run Cursed Merfolk because even though you can race, I believe the value of this deck is actually going harder on the mill strategy. Like you mill your opponent, well, not mill, sorry, discard the hand. You discard the opponent's hand whilst you're using Diablos, Let the Storm Rage On, Beast, even Robin Hood to an extent, to then draw more cards yourself. So basically, you're drawing way more cards than your opponent, and the cards your opponent does draw, until they get on top deck mode, effectively get discarded. And then you use Let the Storm Rage On, Baboom, Strength, We Don't Talk About Bruno, and whatever else you need to push your opponent off board completely, and then you just close out the game. So even though there are a few different cards you could play, for me, I think I prefer the Diablos over the Merfolk. The other card I think is definitely up for debate, and you guys please tell me in the comments if you what you would suggest and if you found any success with anything else. But is the Prince John, because from what I've played of this deck so far, Prince John it's extra. Let's be honest, it's a little bit extra, because with the Diablo kind of does what Prince John does, but a little bit more securely and a little bit faster in a lot of instances. But Prince John is there as like a backup. It's another ward character that can be awkward to deal with, and you sort of do the old school Emerald discard options, right, where you go Bucky, Prince John, then start playing Floodborns, and then every Floodborn is a discard one from your opponent, draw one for you. So it definitely has its job, but Prince John is a card that I'm never happy to see in a lot of instances. It's like it's the worst version of card generation or card draw in the deck, right? There's Diablo, like as we talked about. There's even Ursula with Let the Storm Rage On, and then you've got like Beast and again kind of Robin Hood, kind of not. So yeah, that's the deck, and it's been a nightmare on ladder, I'll tell you that. I've been playing a good chunk. I've been playing my Heroes deck, which you can check out on my YouTube channel. It's Red Steel Heroes, if you've not had a chance to check that out. But a lot of my games on ladder right now are against Emerald Steel, and this is a deck that I'll tell you now, you will either want to be playing or you want to be thinking about how to beat it. The biggest contender I've played against so far to try and disrupt this deck is Amber Steel Songs. because they have ways to just deal with the Diablos pretty easily because they naturally play like Let the Storm Rage On. They have ways to sort of draw multiple cards in a turn. Whole New World can help as well. So that's the one deck to look out for. Maybe that's the one that's going to push this off the top. But as far as I'm concerned, this is the best deck in the game right now. You guys let me know what you think. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time.